You want more on the Avs? You got it.
Honestly, does it really matter right now?
That's the problem, right?
No, just about anybody can get in front of a microphone and talk about hockey. How on earth do you get involved in something like this?
It was kind of a fluke.
It's funny that this podcast is going off the rails so quickly.
This is From the Cheap Seats, an Avalanche fan podcast from 9 News. Seated in the conference room, here are your hosts, Steve Staeger and Geoff Sawtell.
Now, actually, we're in the green room. We really do need to get that updated. And to christen the green room, we brought in someone with the last name Tom Green.
That's my last name.
Tom Green is your last name.
Well, it's good to see you guys. I enjoy the show.
Good to see you, sir. Thank you for coming in.
Nice to visit the room.
Yeah, every now and then. You
Yeah.
gotta come see the room that's named after you, right? It's the Tom Green Memorial Room?
It's like the Lincoln Memorial was named after Abraham Lincoln.
From your first stint here, right? Yeah.
Back in the day.
Exactly. I wanted to bring you in, especially because you and I have talked about this in the newsroom constantly, and it's the thing that is still top of mind for just about everybody is this altitude debate. And you and I were talking because you're a cord cutter.
Yeah, I decided to cut the cord a little over a year ago, and one of the issues with it was altitude for me because they're one of the few that aren't available to those of us who get our television without the use of Direct or Dish or Comcast or something. So it's not available. It hasn't been available. It surprises me that they haven't found an avenue by which to make it available. I was looking at, the rest of the National Hockey League. You have 31 teams. 7 of them in Canada aren't available in the United States via those streaming devices. But of the 24 U.S. teams, 21 are available to people who have cut the cord. Only the Avalanche, the Penguins, and the Las Vegas Golden Knights are not available to people who've cut the cord. So especially with the pressure on right now, trying to find an outlet and satisfy fans, this seems like something that should have been in the works anyway, but would be especially valuable right now.
But I also think that if they had that streaming option, there would be more leverage for altitude in this case, because when you're out on all 3 of the networks, basically no one can see the games, let alone, I guess, maybe the Prism TV and the Spectrum people, but no one can see the games right now.
Right. Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating, and it's obviously we've been talking about the way people are trying to circumnavigate that via illegal, quasi-legal, and maybe entirely legal methods of finding ways to see the games on TV in Colorado.
Yeah. And we don't know if the VPN method... Yeah, because the thing everybody keeps bringing up to me on Twitter is, well, I just bought a VPN and then I buy the NHL package. And I was thinking about that because I responded to a few people saying, like, I try not to steal my TV because I'm, employed by a TV station.
Right.
And it's kind of like when the musicians got pissed about Napster back in the day because it was, I create the music and I don't want people being able to get it for free. I kind of thought the same thing of, these people are putting a ton of work and a ton of time and a ton of money into creating a broadcast. I hate for them to lose whatever revenue they might potentially be able to get.
Yeah, you probably want to pay. It's interesting. I know someone who got in trouble for watching Avalanche hockey, and it's interesting because you think, it's the police or the FBI shows up at your door. It's not. It's 2 NHL linesmen come to your house, and they take you out.
It was very awkward when they showed up at Landeskog's house and accused him of stealing the games when it was
me
absolutely
again.
not.
Why is it always me?
Yeah, right?
I was onside.
I hear that they're working on the challenge for that right now. They're looking at the video of his place. We did get some feedback from our guest last week, and I know a lot of the folks over at Altitude who, like I say, work their butts off and do some incredible work.
Great broadcast.
And Mark Mosier won an Emmy last year for his just play-by-play work. The first game of the season won an Emmy just for being a great sportscast. I know that they don't like the conversation necessarily about the future of regional sports networks and if that model works. By no means does that diminish the quality of their work.
No, the broadcasts are great. That's the thing is, and I understand why they have a side in this fight, why they're so amped up about it. And you can talk about what the distributors, the suppliers actually have at stake here as well. That's another big thing. Basically, all of us who just like to watch hockey, we really are on the sidelines. It is not an issue for us to debate or push or pull. There will be money of ours divided by these 2 entities. How they do it and what its long-term impact is probably not material to most of the people who'd like to be watching the Avs and or the Nuggets when they start playing their regular season too.
And it's the sort of thing, we go through some of these negotiations on a semi-regular basis here.
Right.
And, like, we understand we're not involved in that. People see the little ticker on the top of the screen talking about, oh, make sure to call you. And we have nothing to do with those negotiations.
Although,
we're just trying to put out the best product we can. It's like, that's what they're trying to do.
Although,
Right.
and I feel bad for the folks at Altitude because of this, because you and I can attest to this. We, as a public face of the organization, tend to sometimes get the commentary from people that we
Right.
can't necessarily respond to because we're not in the room negotiating this.
No, and you're generally, I've been in a couple of stations now where you're involved in this thing, and they tell you not to really get involved because it is not you. I'm not negotiating.
Yeah.
I don't even know what's on the table, so it's hard for me to really comment. What people want is what they want. How they get it, they don't want to know. It's very much like sausage. Don't tell me how to make it. Just give me a good one.
And laws.
Yeah.
Laws and sausages. Let's talk about the team. From what you've been able to see, and I'm assuming what you've been able to see is basically highlights, right?
Yeah. I try to watch as much as I can, and I'm obviously being around hockey. I've been a hockey fan all my life, so I've watched this team since it came here, and this is an exciting year. It reminds me a bit of after the Rangers won the Cup and then they had the strike year. It's just a matter in this market. What's happening right now is you are taking a team in great ascension, a team that has returned to the pinnacle of people's minds, and taking it away from them. It's a real missed opportunity. The question is how long it lasts as far as the television. As far as on the ice, man, they have great problems. They have guys who they can't play everybody every night. They suddenly have forwards who are going to watch some hockey games, and if they stay healthy, it's going to be a complicated problem making sure that everybody gets minutes. It's a great problem.
It's a great problem to have. They were fun to watch. I was at the Boston game last night. Fun to watch in the third period and maybe second half of the second period. They came out very flat, which I think was a symptom of the week off that they had.
Like any pro athletes, they love that rhythm. Let's play every other night. Let's play every other night. They love their time off, but then it does take a while to get back into that flow that it takes to, especially hockey's such a free-form sport. You all have assignments, but the puck moves and you react to it constantly throughout the game. So that kind of flow takes a while to get back. I think this 4-game homestand open the season is perfect and difficult. It's that 6-game road trip that follows that I think we will really get a good idea of how good they are, because I think generally offense travels okay, but how well do you bring your defense on the road? And that's what I want to see.
And we also want to know about goaltending.
Yeah. We've got Francouz,
Francouz.
Have we decided how we're going to pronounce this?
You've got Pavel, who's the backup goaltender.
Ruby's backup, yeah.
And he's starting tomorrow night.
He'll go against Arizona, right?
And this
Which
podcast will
happened.
be released by the time that goes, so who knows how he does. But that's really their only main concern right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Grubauer, was not a star last year. He earned the job in many ways by default and then got hot. He had a great playoff run, and he was one of the reasons that the team played so well in the postseason. But, if you really want to win, if you want to play late, and if you want to win a Stanley Cup, your goalie has to be at the top of his game. And Grubauer has a top of his game. That's the one thing we've seen, that he has a very high ceiling. When he's good, he's really good.
That stop he made in the game on Saturday against the Wild, which will have been weeks ago by the time that this gets released. But he just robbed a guy on I forget who it was on the breakaway, but and it was a Patrick Waugh style glove up.
The sweeping glove.
Sweeping glove. Yeah, it was fun to watch. But
I think the most encouraging thing I've seen from Grubauer so far has been, he came out a little flat in that first game. The first 2 periods let in a couple goals he probably wanted back. But that third period, he refocused, came in, just sort of locked in and was lights out, and he's held on to that. And having a goalie that can come back and respond like that is spectacular.
And how well they play in front of him. Every goaltender needs help. And this team, I think everyone, like we do in almost all sports, we grade everyone on how they play offensively. We love to talk about Makar and Girard rushing the puck and that first line being able to just skate through teams. But, you're going to spend, if you have a great night, there's 25 minutes where the puck is in your half of the ice. So how do you play then? How do your top line offensive players play back defensively, and how big and strong are you along the blue line? Because, as much as everyone likes Samuel Girard, when he's down in his own end for a minute, that's a lot to ask of him. He can get places, but what can he do when he gets there? Well, he works at it. It's not like he's too small to play. That's not the case at all. But I was watching him, I think it was a couple of years ago, the Rangers were in town, and he got into a corner with Rick Nash, who's about 6'5" and about 230 pounds, and it just looked like, Dad taking his kid out in the driveway, and but Gerard makes you pay so hard at the other end that it's not like there's no free money in hockey, and I always say, the best thing I love about hockey is at the professional level, effort can still beat talent. And that doesn't translate to baseball or basketball or football, where talent wins 90% of the time. In hockey, if you don't do the dirty stuff on the wall, in the corner, in the slot, if you don't win those pucks, if you don't take the punishment to stay places where they don't want you to be, you probably won't win. And you look at the good teams and what they're made of, and it's not, it's the leather that they're made of. How tough are they? And I thought last year this Avalanche team, for being as young as they were, played with a lot of leather. And now they're a year older. Now they're not a mystery to anyone, but they're definitely not a mystery to themselves. They know how good they are. So how do they play with that? I can't wait to see through the rest of the season.
You're talking about that effort, sometimes beating talent side. We saw that a bit, and we're starting to see that this season with Nathan MacKinnon. Mm-hmm. And what it is the other team putting in the effort to just basically barrage him. He has no room to move. He had a goal last night, but it was kind of a fluky type goal. You can see the frustration in his eyes out there that he can't get anything going.
Watch him adapt, though. I always remember when Mario Lemieux was at the height of his game, they would strictly shadow him. They'd just have people trail him around. He'd just go skate to another defender, and now there's two guys around him, which means it's a power play over there, guys. Yep. The rest of the Penguins have a lot of room to move. And Nathan MacKinnon, I think, has the patience now as an older player to understand that if they're going to shadow me, we're going to punish you.
Not to mention, he's talked a bit about how he's actually seeing a sports psychologist right now who's working with him on just kind of getting his head out of the game. And you can see it because I was watching him during a media timeout last night, and he had been shut down a couple of times. He could touch the puck, but he's got three guys on him and just can't get through anywhere. And he skates around the corner. He's going around the face-off circles down at the bottom while the whole rest of the team's on the bench, and he's just flipping the stick. You could tell that was his way of kind of getting the aggression out and kind of getting out of his head. And he made a couple of good plays in the next play. He seemed less frustrated than we typically see.
I think at the end of the year, when you add it up, he's going to have 35 and 100. He's going to have 100 points. He's going to have 35 goals. How and when he gets them, and he may have more, but I wouldn't worry about, if I'm going to worry about the Avs, Nathan MacKinnon's low on my list of things I'm worried about. If teams want to try to stop him, teams focus on him, have been doing that for a couple years now.
And watch Rantanen start lighting him up then they've got to go pay attention to him, and it opens him, MacKinnon back
Exactly. There's a lot of room on the ice all of a sudden.
Yeah. One final thing before we let you go, because it's 3:45. I know you got to go to the show. You had suggested to us, because Jeff and I took a trip last year and followed the team. Your suggestion was to go to St. Louis and Chicago this year, which is I think it's a total of 4 days, 2 games on the road. We're doing it.
Well, last year you guys had that great Canadian trip, and then you look at the road trips this year, and then sometimes they're herky-jerky. Sometimes you could just sit in New York and watch 3 games in 4 days or something like that. But I thought, Chicago's such a great hockey town, and it's always good to see the Blackhawks on the ice. And then, the Blues were the story of the NHL last year, and it's also fun because obviously those two towns are near each other and they hate each other. So you just go out there and get in the mix and see where Bobby Hull and then Brett Hull played in Chicago and St. Louis.
Tom Green, thank you for coming in and spending some time with us. This is the conversation that the three of us typically just have in the newsroom. We figured we'd just bring it on the podcast.
Well, I love the show. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in the cheap seats. So coming up next, we're going to talk to Justin Goldman, who is one of the emergency backup goalies for the Colorado Avalanche. I'm fascinated. I can't wait to talk to him. We'll talk to him next.
Be brave. Speak up if you see something that's not quite right. If you've been wronged or see wrongdoing, together, let's try to make it right. Email us at blowthewhistle@9news.com.
Want to know what's going on in Colorado? Check out the Colorado Guide on the new 9 News app. We've got unique and interesting stories from what's happening in our state. Plus, the 9 things to do in Colorado this weekend. The 9 News app. Download it today.
Joined now by Justin Goldman, who is wearing, for those of you who are not watching the YouTube video, is wearing a hat that says E-Bug. He is one of the emergency backup goalies for the Colorado Avalanche. Justin, thank you for joining us.
I'm so glad I was able to make it.
Stoked to have you here. We've been really excited about this interview for a while. How on earth do you get involved in the emergency backup goalie program?
If you hang around for long enough, eventually you're going to get a shot. And
So you're saying I've got a chance?
you definitely have a chance. That is the great thing about this emergency backup role. No, I've been very fortunate to be involved in pro hockey for going on 15 years now. And many, many years ago, there was a DJ by the name of Uncle Nasty who used to appear on a radio station, KBPI, huge hockey fan. And I was actually coaching his son, who was playing at the University of Denver. The kid was like 5 or 6 years old, and comes up to me after the game. He's like, "Hey, man, what's up?" And we just started talking, and next thing you know, that he's having me on his radio show to talk about the Avalanche, just about pre-games and what's going on next. And we would do a 5-minute, interview and talk hockey, and that was it. And so I started doing that and got involved in covering hockey locally. And just like I said, been hanging around long enough to where I was able to develop really good relationships with a lot of the, not just the Avs players and some of the staff members, but people that were involved in the front office and would play beer league hockey with some of these guys. And they always knew I was a very avid goalie, and been covering goalies for a really long time. Used to write for NHL.com, and I've written a couple books on goaltenders. So I've just been hanging around a long time, and they knew I was here. And when the league came down with this new rule, I was contacted by someone at the Avs, and the opportunity presented itself. And I just was like, oh my gosh, yes, first of all. And before I was able to put 2 and 2 together, the next thing I knew, this was the deal. They got a group of goalies that were pretty high-level beer league guys. I think one of the rules was you weren't allowed to have ever played professional hockey before, but you had to have at least played club hockey at the college level or higher. And I played a couple of games for Colorado State University back in 2001. And so I was barely eligible, and I took it and ran with it, and here we are.
I was going to say, did they run you through a test? Did they have Nathan McKinnon shoot on you for a while and just see how that works?
Thank goodness, no. What's really cool is that every NHL team kind of handles it differently, I guess. And so for the Avalanche, there was no tryout or anything like that. I wish there was. I know that would have been really cool. But just the fact that they were able to reach out to someone like myself, who, again, had been involved in pro hockey for many years and had been hanging around and doing some radio stuff here and there, just to get the opportunity, I think was amazing. And it was so cool how the Avs kind of made it happen, just reaching out to us and giving us this opportunity and telling us what it was all about. And of course, me and my buddies who got the gig that first year were just blown away. We couldn't comprehend it. It was just one of those things that you've been dreaming about, your whole life, like an opportunity to somehow end up in an NHL game. And then when it hits you and it's real, you're just like, oh my gosh, you feel like the luckiest man alive. And that's kind of how I felt. It's just been an insane experience, but something that I'll treasure forever and just absolutely relish for the rest of my life.
Back up for a second. You were talking about the new rule, and when did that come into effect? Do you remember?
So I think it was 3 seasons ago, and what had happened was there was a game with the Florida Panthers, and the goalies were Roberto Luongo and James Reimer. And Roberto Luongo went down with an injury, serious injury. I think it was almost like a broken collarbone. So he was out. So James Reimer goes into the game, and I'm pretty sure that was the backup goalie. Excuse me if I'm wrong. But James Reimer, I believe, was the backup, goes in the game, and he gets cramps or something like that. And so he can't play, and there's no one else there with goalie gear. So what ended up happening is they had to stop the game for 10 or 15 minutes. You can imagine TV broadcasting and all the rules and everything else, just everyone's going nuts.
TV broadcasting, what's that?
And so the story goes, the goalie coach for the Florida Panthers was Rob Tallis, and he had played in the NHL previously. He goes down into the locker room, grabs Roberto Luongo's gear, since Luongo was absolutely done, and he gets suited up, and he gets ready to go into the game, and the refs are like, no. And so there's just this mass confusion, I think, with not only the teams, but the referees, and I don't even remember what happened after that, but that was what I think kind of instigated this new rule that, man, we have to have at least someone here that can fill in case not only the first goalie goes down, but the second goalie can't play as well. We can't just have this huge stoppage and this mass hysteria or this mayhem or whatever. We got to find someone that can at least step in. And then all of a sudden, this new rule came through that I believe, and obviously I'm not sure how, if it's word for word, but basically every NHL team is responsible for having someone in the stands that can sign that emergency contract if they're called upon to step in and back up for, the remainder of a game or for a period or whatever the case may be.
And that was going to be my question is, do you have a pre-signed contract that I'm available to do this, or do you actually sign it in the locker room while you're getting dressed?
I think you sign it in the locker room while you're getting dressed because we've all heard about the Scott Foster story.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you guys are familiar with that.
Chicago Blackhawks, right?
I mean, how do you live up to that now? Like, the guy goes in and stops all 7 shots, and it's like, well, great, if I fall on my face, yeah, right? Shutout in 14 or 15 minutes of hockey. And
yeah, that's something.
I've seen a lot of things in pro hockey over the years, and I don't think I will ever see anything quite as amazing as that moment. Obviously, I'm biased because it's a goalie situation, but man, the odds of that happening and for him to just go in and make those saves. But to get back to the question, I think that's how it works, but I'm sure it's different in every instance, just depending on, what's going on or what the situation is or how urgent it is. But yeah, maybe it'll happen at some point for me. I don't know.
This is, and I understand if you can't answer this question. Yeah. How does the money work? Do you get a percentage of what an entry level contract was based on hours of play? Or
yeah, and doing my crack research here on eBug rules, I believe it is $500 if you actually have to dress and go on the bench. And then, of course, you get to keep the jersey and you get some awesome stuff from the players and some handshakes and stuff like that. But I believe that's what it is if you do actually have to dress and sign a contract as an emergency backup goalie for the remainder of that game, you do get $500. And I don't know if that's changed. I hear some different things. And again, I think it's just different on every occasion depending on the situation and what team it is and all that stuff.
So do you have a number picked out, reserved for you just in case?
If I had to choose, it would be number 30. That's just the number I've played with. But I'm sure
that's
I'd be
goalie
getting
number, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I'd be getting X-8 or something super, super bizarre, whatever, 98. Who knows? Yeah. I'm guessing they have an extra jersey that just needs a back plate added to it. But man, these situations are so rare when actually someone has to dress. That I think it's a great rule. Obviously, I think it's a great rule, but it's just bizarre, and it's really hard to find information on what exactly happens because it is so rare when it does go down. But it seems like every season there's more and more goalies getting hurt, and there's more and more of these situations where goalies want some time off during practices, and so that emergency goalie will go in and just fill in during practices, and that would be a dream as well.
I was saying, you've never done that.
No. I've this is my third season being one of the emergency backup goalies for the Avalanche. I've not been called to practice or obviously get dressed, but there were probably 4 or 5 instances a couple seasons ago where some of the emergency backup goalies did have to at least get dressed during Avalanche games because of goalies on the other team getting hurt. And so that's one of the cool rules is that you're eligible for both teams. So even if, let's say Arizona coming into town, they're playing against the Avs and Antti Raanta gets hurt, we're eligible to wear the Coyotes jersey as well. So pretty bizarre.
5-minute swing from being in the stands rooting for the Avs to try to stop them.
Right. And please, no, I don't want to be facing McKinnon or Landeskog,
no.
On and
probably not on the
rush.
other side either. You probably don't want to face some of those shooters on the other side.
No, and obviously I've been really lucky to, be on the ice with some of these guys at different goalie camps and stuff like that. And just being on the ice with them, it is incredible how skilled they are. They are machines, and they're amazing athletes. And the ability for them to not just have the eye-hand coordination, but to do it at that pace with that much pressure on them, with 18,000 people screaming at them to score all the time. I mean, it's remarkable, and utmost respect for anyone involved in pro hockey at any level, which is easy for me to say being a beer leaguer, but it's amazing. And just being at these games, at these Avalanche games, the speed that this team has is awesome.
That's
really
fun
awesome
to watch. If you've ever, I was on the ice level of an Avs practice because I was at an open skate, a stick and puck at Family Sports Center right before the Avs took the ice. And I was in the locker room getting undressed and come out with my gear. And I'm walking out and these guys are on the ice and I'm thinking like, man, I thought that was moving fast before. This is moving really fast.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how different it is watching from the stands and then you're on the ice level and it's just... It's like 10 times, it's magnified times 10. It's amazing.
But I would never have to face these guys. You would.
See, and and sometimes I'm like, I catch myself thinking about it and the anxiety definitely ramps up. And the whole day I feel like that. So whenever I do, you get your schedule at the beginning of the season. So I know what my schedule is in advance, which is nice. And it's cool because we get to kind of pick the games that we want. And all 5 of us are really good friends. And it's just a great, cool experience. We're like, oh, you got the next game. You got this game. What's going on? And if we have to fill in, so there could be a chance where we need an emergency backup for the emergency backup. That's always kind of fun.
Somebody gets sick or something like that.
Right. And we're there to fill in and make sure, we're handling our duties as professionally as possible. We do take it very seriously. It is an absolute honor to have this opportunity. But yeah, it is a very anxious-ridden day, especially, I've got my 9-to-5 job at MindSpark Learning and yeah, you're thinking about it all day. There's not a minute that doesn't go by where you're like, oh my gosh, this could happen. And obviously we all know the odds are so slim, but you do not want to get caught unprepared if it does happen. So you have to have that mindset, just like you're going into any real game, whether it's beer league or whatever sport you're playing, like you get yourself amped up, you're trying to mentally prepare. And it's just so bizarre because you're like, well, 99.99% chance this isn't happening. But for that 0.001, I mean, look at what happened to Scott Foster, man.
Was it a playoff game too? Or was it right before the
it was
playoff?
Down the stretch,
Yeah, it was down the stretch. And so the thing that I always think about with Scott Foster is like the amazingness of what he did and how unreal that experience was to just watch it, much less be him and like make those saves. But imagine if that had playoff implications. Like imagine if they were 1 point out of the playoffs and they needed 2 points and then all of a sudden Scott Foster and they're up by a goal. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think I'm really interested to see how the league treats this role moving forward, because if I were a GM and that was the situation and they were, fighting for every point to make the playoffs and they had to deal with an I'd be tearing my hair out.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine. So it's just bizarre. It's just one of those things that you do not see in any other professional sport anywhere in the world.
You told me a bit about this before when you were talking about sitting at MindSpark all day and thinking about it. What's your day like? Take me through the day in the life of an emergency backup goalie.
It honestly is very, it's a normal day, but again, you are fighting internally between, do I take this seriously? Do I hydrate all day? Do I go to the gym in the morning and get in that pregame workout? What do I really want to do here? Because if I take it too seriously, I burn myself out before I even get to Pepsi Center. If I don't take it seriously at all and I'm just ho-hum throughout the day, and then I get to Pepsi Center and oh my gosh, all of a sudden something happens and I'm caught unprepared, that would be a disaster, and that's not what you want. I mean, I'm a beer leaguer. I've been around the game most of my life. I take it seriously. So I try to balance it out between not taking it too serious and being like, oh, okay, here we go. I'm getting in this game. This is the night it's going to happen. And just making sure that, again, I'm respectful to the position. I'm respectful to the Colorado Avalanche for giving me this opportunity in the first place. Treat the game with respect, and the game will respect you in return. And so if I do get that opportunity, I know I'm ready. And so it's just trying to find that balance, man, just like anything else in life. And, you get to the game and you want to have the nachos, you want to have the beer. Nope.
Can't do it.
Can't do it.
Do you have to sign something that says you can't have a beer at the game?
No, but it's pretty obvious. I mean, and that's the thing. And it sounds kind of funny, and I know this whole thing is bizarre, and it sounds kind of funny, but we do want to set want to set certain expectations, because we want to see this role thrive and grow, and we want to see it flourish, and we love just the fact that we're here talking about this is amazing, because most outlets and most people just, again, like you said, don't even know it exists. And so it is so unique, and it is so wonderful to have this kind of opportunity to be able to talk about it. That, I do want to take it as professionally as possible, but at the same time, still have fun with it and still be like who I am, just a normal beer league guy that loves goaltending, that loves hockey, and is just absolutely cherishing this opportunity.
So you walk into Pepsi Center, you're not having nachos, you're not having a beer.
Nope, I have some anxiety. I'm not afraid to admit that.
Do you bring your gear, by the way?
Yes. So the way it works is that we have to be at Pepsi Center a few hours before the game, drop off our gear. That's a cool experience because you come through the player's entrance and, you see some guys kicking the ball around. And you're like, yeah, I'm ready, bro. I'm ready. Like, here we go. This is going to be an awesome night.
Do they know you?
No, but they're always like kind of looking at you weird. Like, why is this random skinny dude like bringing his gear into the arena? Like, what's going on? But I think also some players know, like, oh, he's the emergency backup goalie. Like, all right, we'll rip this guy up if we ever get the chance. So you never, so I'm sure some guys, they give you the weird looks, but then other people, they're like, okay, we got you. And it's great. Like, it's awesome to like walk past the players, and again, the respect is there, which I think is the coolest thing. And that's one of the great things about pro hockey players is that they respect everyone and they do really handle themselves so professionally, and it's just it's a cool experience. But yeah, it's like the anxiety is pretty high just because like this is a legitimate role and you do want to take it seriously, but also enjoy the experience as much as you can. And so for me, it's like just getting past the sweaty palms part and then making sure that I'm really dialed in during the warm-up, because that's usually when things will happen. Like goalies can get pucks from weird angles, and guys are firing pucks when you're turning around to get pucks out of the net, and you could tweak things, and I mean anything can happen in a warm-up. So I always just make sure I'm there and watching both goalies as much as I can, watching every single puck, and it's kind of fun. Like again, you try and balance between not taking it too seriously but also respecting the position. And so, yeah, you're dialed in during that warm-up, and then the goalies go off the ice, and you kind of breathe a little and step back and say, okay, here we go. Like, all right, it's just a normal game. And then the first period, you're like, that's when I think the anxiety is a little bit high because it's so early in the game. Usually after the second period, that's when I relax, because if a goalie were to get hurt in the third period, by the time I would go down and get dressed, the game's probably pretty close to over. And so I know there are times when goalies do get hurt in the third period and then the backup goes in, there's no one on the bench, but I think it just kind of ends there because the odds of them actually having, the emergency backup having to go in are pretty slim because there's 5 or 10 minutes left in the game. So usually by the third period, that's when I'll like eat something. Usually it might be the first time I've eaten all day just because again, like the anxiety's high. I'm not afraid to admit that. Like definitely feel the anxiety. And
we're going to talk about that too, because that's an important part of this whole interview too.
Yeah. So that's kind of it.
So where do you sit?
So past season, the first 2 years we would sit in like row 8 or 9 right by the VOM where the Avs come onto the ice. So we're as close to the locker room as possible. So that, if we do get the call, we can go straight in. This year, it's pretty cool. We're pretty close to the glass, even closer to being able to get into the locker room if we need to. So again, it's like every year the Avs do such a great job of like building it up and making it a more not more professional, but just things are getting organized more, I think, around the league. And so, it's just awesome to kind of see this growth over the last 3 seasons with this role.
Yeah.
So if you it all happens, both goalies go down, you have to go into the game. Are you doing all the superstitious stuff? You hopping over the line? You tapping your posts?
I'm honestly, I don't really have a lot of superstitions.
Really?
I don't.
You might be the first goalie I've ever met that doesn't.
I know. I'm bucking the trend here. There's one superstition that I have, and I wouldn't even call it a superstition. It's just like a thing. That doesn't really clear it up very much, but here it is. I do not put a water bottle on top of my net. And the reason for that is I do not want to give shooters a target, because the worst feeling is when that water bottle gets popped.
Yeah.
So why even give shooters a chance? So that's kind of weird. Like guys are like, don't you want your water bottle? And I'm like, nah, I'm good. If I need water, I'll skate to the bench and get it.
You know, Rocket Varley used to, and I swear it was a superstition of his, that he would not put the bottle on the net until the first whistle.
Yes.
And then you would see the bench slide it over the ice all the way over to the goal line.
Right.
Did you notice that too?
I noticed, yeah.
I thought I might be the only person in the building who noticed that.
I thought he just forgot it a few games until you pointed it out.
I said it's like that every single game.
Yeah, and I think, as as a guy that promotes goaltending and got the goalie guild and stuff, we try to like break down superstition versus just routine. And, a lot of goalie coaches try and get away from that as well, because we don't want kids to develop superstitions, because we don't want them to rely on those things always having to be perfect in order to play well. So I think a lot of goalies, like, yeah, they have their quirks and they have their things, but I think they're mostly just part of a routine. Like, that's how they get comfortable. But if it doesn't work out, like if Varley were to get the bottle rolled and it rolls past him and into the net, like, he's not going to freak out and completely collapse. Or if the water bottle is accidentally empty or something like that, like, he won't have a spaz attack. You know what I mean? Like, so we try and get away from kids developing those superstitions, because then they start to rely on those to perform at their best, and just say, hey, yeah, if you have, some quirks, that's fine. Or if you have the routine, that's good. So I would say my not having a water bottle on top of the net, yeah, that kind of like, that treads the line between a superstition, but it's more like, I guess, part of the competitiveness in me. Like, I'm not going to give you a chance to pop.
Well, you've got a good reason for it. Yeah. It's not a superstition.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want them. You don't want a target on top of near the crossbar.
Oh, it's brutal. Yeah. And believe me, it's happened to me before. Like, before I started not having a bottle on top of my net. I mean, there were definitely times where that thing was soaring to the sky because I was getting beat glove side. So, yeah, it's just, again, I don't really, for me, it's like I always put the right piece of gear on first, which I think is really common in hockey. I love all black gear. So that's like a thing for me. But yeah, in terms of like superstitions or having to do like really quirky things, no, I guess it's pretty straightforward.
Do you tell your beer league guys that, hey, in case you were wondering, I'm the emergency backup goalie for the Colorado Avalanche?
I feel like every time I say that, I end up getting torn apart.
Really?
Yeah. It's like it must be an ego thing. So
they light you up all of a sudden?
Yeah, because then they get the target on the back. But no, I mean, the guys that I play with are awesome, and we play at the beer league at DU, and it's a great league. And what's really cool this season is that we've been joined by Joe Sakic's two sons. So Chase and Mitch Sakic are playing for us, which is awesome. So my life's a lot easier right now because they've joined us for the season, which is really, really cool. So yeah, it's I think, again, to me, the less I think about it, the easier it is. But for something like this, obviously, it's great to be able to promote the role. Because, again, there's 30 other teams out there where there's a group of guys that are doing this, and we try and talk as often as possible. There's some guys that I know and some guys that I don't, but overall, I think we just like really cherish the opportunity, and we try and downplay it, because 99.9% of the time we're just going to the game and going home. It's just like experiencing it like a fan, but there is that 0.001% where maybe we have to be ready. And so you have to have that professionalism, and you have to have that respect, and sort of stay out of the way, but also be prepared if something happens. And, I take great pride in being 37 years old and in good enough shape and still talented enough to be able to possibly even step into a practice. And would I get torn up? Absolutely. But if a couple of pucks hit me, I've done my job, right? I've given them something to shoot at. And if I get that opportunity, whether it's in a practice or, pregame warm up for a few minutes, like, it'd be one of the highlights of my life for sure.
Wow. What an interesting thing to find yourself into. Do you ever pinch yourself and say, like, what is this? What am I doing?
I grew up on a horse farm in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And this whole journey I've been on for the past 15 years in pro hockey, doing all this goalie stuff, I pinch myself every day. But I also go back to what I said earlier. Like, if you respect the game and you respect anything in life, the respect will come back to you. And I've put endless hours into my craft on the ice, as a journalist, as a builder in the goaltending community. And to get this opportunity is absolutely a dream. And yes, I do pinch myself, but I also feel like I've put in the work. I've put in the work, yeah. And my friends that know me know it as well. My family knows, hey, you've dedicated your life to this position. I run a nonprofit foundation to help kids that can't afford the gear and can't afford these training opportunities. And, I have had this amazing opportunity to cover the Avalanche as a radio guy and doing podcasts and stuff like that. So again, I go back to the fact that there's just so much respect in this game. The Avalanche have so much respect for just a regular guy like myself. And I have so much respect for them because they easily could have given this opportunity to a million other people that are more talented and do have a little bit more, you know, whether it's they played D1 in college or anything like that. But just the fact that I get to do this for a few games, and I believe the rule is that you age out at 40. Don't quote me on that. I hope I'm wrong because I'm getting close to 38.
Yeah.
So, like, I want to do this as long as possible, but I do think if I get to a point where I don't think I'm ready, it's like, you know, you got to hang up the skates and retire and pass on that role to someone else.
But it's still a pretty cool tradition that you were part of.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about the Goalie Guild.
Thank you. Yeah.
What is the Goalie Guild? How did you start it?
Yeah, so the Goalie Guild started 10 years ago, and I was one of the first guys to just provide goalie-specific analysis on social media. So this was back when Twitter was just starting. And back then, there were no goalie blogs. There were no goalie writers, except for maybe a couple guys in Canada.
Was this a period before trolls? The magical time of Twitter?
No, definitely not, because you can
Okay.
imagine a Texan talking about goalies at a high level. A lot of people are like, what does this guy know about goaltending?
Didn't go over that well.
Didn't go over that well. I've had my fair share of naysayers, but again, just plug away and grind and focus on what you can control. And I think that was it. It was the fact that nobody else was really covering goalies and providing goalie analysis. And I've always felt like I've had a fairly good eye for the position. And again, it's my passion. Like, I love just watching different goalie styles. I love learning about the differences between Swedish goalies and Finnish goalies. And I grew up loving Mika Kiprusoff, and Henrik Lundqvist came out of nowhere. And you're like, why is this Swedish goalie so good? He's never played in North America before. I think I just became fascinated with the differences in styles. And being able to just drop that analysis on Twitter, I was able to kind of build this community really fast because no one else was doing it. So it's kind of like right place at the right time and zero competition because I was the only one crazy enough to do it like many, many times a night. Like it was almost unhealthy, but I was watching games every night. I mean, I was obsessed. And sometimes that's what it takes to become an expert in something. You talk about 10,000 hours and this, that, and the other. And the Goalie Guild grew really, really fast because nobody else was providing that goalie-specific stuff, talking about technique and strategy and style. And then I think I got my big break in 2011. That's when I got the opportunity to write for NHL.com. I did that for 4 years, and that led to the next step, which was joining USA Hockey as a goalie scout. So I moved to Minnesota and scouted for the NTDP, and just watched a lot of hockey in Minnesota. The high school scene was outrageous there. It's amazing how many people go out to watch high school hockey in Minnesota. And I soaked up that culture for 2 years. And that's when, so that was like 2012 to 2014. And then I became obsessed with traveling overseas and studying Finnish and Swedish goalies because I had grown up, watching these guys that looked so unique. You talk about Dominik Hasek and the goalies that were just, back in the 90s when I first started watching hockey.
That was the era for goalies.
Yeah.
Man, wasn't it? And like
Yeah, it
every
was.
goalie was so different.
Yeah, you got Eddie Belfour. I always bring him up just because his style was so different. But then you've got Dominik Hasek, who basically had a slinky for a spine. I don't think that he could stand up or sit up straight. I think he would just bend backwards. Like, the dude was so flexible.
Man, and there was a method to his madness. And back then when I watched him, I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now, just because I've been watching these goalies evolve and the position evolve. And it is very standardized now. It's very structured. These guys are technical savants, right? Like, they're just amazing. It's so hard to beat a goalie on a clean shot now. But back then, more goals were going in, but goalies were just so creative and so unique, and they didn't have the advantages with the gear, and they didn't have the size or the athletic ability. They didn't have goalie coaching on a full-time basis back then. I mean, the goalie coaching in the NHL is still a relatively new thing. So these were super creative, really gritty guys that just found ways to stop pucks in ways that you just don't see now. Unless it's, your occasional pad stack or, the windmill crazy sliding save. I mean, you still see it, but for the most part, these guys now are just so consistent with their movements. They're such gifted athletes that you just don't see the Eddie Belfours and the Haseks before.
Yeah.
I became really obsessed besides just like watching NHL goalies and breaking down NHL games. I became really obsessed with again, stylistic differences and cultural differences in other countries. Like, why are all these Finnish goalies coming over here and why are their glove hands so good? Like, what are they doing to the goalies over there that make them? And then you go over there and you see the culture and you see Pesapalo, which is Finnish baseball. And then you start to understand, well, that's why some of these Finnish goalies are so good at catching pucks. And so it's this whole cultural thing. And I was just so lucky to be able to experience traveling overseas and studying the position from some of the top goalie coaches all over the world. And I think I came back from that tour. I wrote my second book, and then I said, you know what? This game has given me so much. It's time to give back. And so I left my job at USA Hockey. I moved back to Colorado in 2014, started working for my dad for the family business to make steady income, and then that allowed me to turn the Goalie Guild, which had been like this goalie analysis and independent scouting website, into a 501c3 nonprofit foundation, and that was in the summer of 2014. So since then, it's just been giving back to the goalie community. Like I said, it's a very underserved, I don't want to say under-respected, but maybe underappreciated position. And we are in need of more goalie coaches. We are in need of more goalies at the youth level. Like, we do need more gear for these kids. And even looking at something like gaming and esports, like, how can we get more kids interested in goaltending, but get through kind of those financial barriers, because it is so expensive and it's hard to find a goalie coach. So when you do find one, they're pricey.
Well, and you were talking about your love for this and just, how you love the craft. I would argue that in a lot of cases, it's tough to convince kids to do it. A, because it's expensive, but B, because it's not as sexy as being a forward. Because if you're a forward, you're the guy scoring the goals.
Yeah.
You're a defenseman, you're making sweet moves and stopping pucks, on shooters. But as a goalie, it's the most important job on the ice. And I would imagine it's tough to convince kids to want to go into something like that.
It is. But you know what? The kids that do gravitate towards it, whether it's the gear like it was for me, just seeing these guys, like, the first connection I made to goaltending was, oh my gosh, that's a knight in armor over there. And that guy's going into battle, and he is the last line of defense, and I want to do that. Like, I want to be the guy that's taking on it's like a warrior, and, like, I love medieval stuff. I love middle-aged stuff, like Vikings and Game of Thrones and all that good stuff. Like, that just appeals to me. And so it was natural for me to gravitate to the goaltending position. So I think there are a lot of kids that naturally gravitate towards it. Like, they want to put on the mask, they want to wear the gloves, they want to hold the big stick and be on the ice, for the whole game, but they just can't afford the gear. Or their parents are like, you know what, like, that's great that you love that, but why don't you go play basketball? That costs like $5.
Yep.
Or there's like 10 basketball courts between here and home, but to go to an ice rink is 45 minutes in the other direction.
But then you can tell them that in beer league, like, you get a discount usually if you're the goalie. You don't have to pay as much.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll cover the goalie costs.
Absolutely. I think I can say I've been a professional goalie because there's been 2 times where a beer league team has paid me to come out and play.
Really?
Wow. Hey, $20. I will take it. That pays for my skate sharpening and a roll of tape.
They don't even pay you in beer?
There you go. You know what? Yes, but honestly, and I know this is heresy, but I'm not into drinking a beer after a hockey game. I just go straight to sleep.
Well, it's exhausting. Well, you spend playing goalie. You played goalie, didn't you?
Very briefly.
Oh, I got to hear this story.
Like street hockey level. I mean, this was not.
Okay, hey, that's all right.
Yeah.
Did you make some good saves though? Stop some pucks.
Get the glove up.
Probably the highlight, actually. You mentioned this early on that you were in the club team at CSU. So I was actually also at CSU in 2001 and had some friends who wanted to try out for that.
Are you kidding?
And so we went out onto the roller hockey rink there. Yeah. And I had no gear, no nothing. We just had little rubber balls, and I was just standing there to give them something to shoot around.
Okay.
And that was as close as I got to playing at CSU.
You might have been there.
Wait, so you
might have been out there.
Oh my gosh, yeah, maybe we know.
We'll compare notes at the end.
Yeah,
here.
and I was saying earlier when I first saw the podcast and I saw the video, I was like, I swear I've seen you at a metal show somewhere.
I'm sure you have.
Are you metalhead?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that later because I was just at a Monomarth last week and it was good.
We're going to start a second podcast.
I have no idea what that is.
Nothing goes better together than hockey and metal. I just have to put that.
Well, you go to any hockey game and you'll hear metal. Yeah, it's the natural.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about mental health and goaltending. You were talking about the anxiety that you feel. I know that your charity, do you guys do a little bit of work with that?
We do.
And
we do.
How do you get that message across? Because so much of the game falls on a goaltender. And I imagine it's just unbearable oh, what's this?
So a couple years ago, and yeah, I mean, goaltending is amazing, but it can be really, really tough because you are kind of on an island by yourself. Like, player goes off the ice after he makes a mistake, coach is right there to pat him on the shoulder. It's okay, no worries, you'll get it next time. And then they get a little break, and then they're back out there, and they can just move on. For goaltender, you're alone in that crease with your thoughts and no one to talk to and no one to hear you and no one to console you if something's going wrong or you're just feeling down. And the other part is like it is 90% mental because you have to find a way to clear your mind so you are just focused on the puck. And as soon as you're not focused on the puck, that's when you get hurt or that's when, things start to spiral down. And so every game, every practice, you're almost battling yourself because you're trying to find that zone, that comfort level where you are just, breathing normally and you're not allowing these negative thoughts to come in or you're not worrying about what's going to happen next or the goal that you just gave up. And to do that by yourself with no one to reassure you or no one to kind of help you get through that can be really tough. And so for me, like, even though I've never been, diagnosed with depression or anything like that, I've always been very happy and very fortunate to have like very good mental health. Of course, I still experience anxiety and I experience, times where I'm just like caught in this web of negative thought because that's just naturally what's going to happen when you play this position. And so what I've experienced over these years, working within the goalie community is that a lot of coaches want to help their kids. They see the signs and they know the kid is struggling, but they don't want to push the wrong buttons. So instead of going out and saying something, they're like, well, I'm just going to let this goalie do his or her thing. Like, I'm just going to let them do the thing. Goalies are different. Like, we don't want to get into their space. Instead of going up and actually trying to reach out to them, they just say nothing. And that, I think, is where I realized we have to do something to, promote mental health and start having some discussions about these things in the goalie community. And so that's where Lift the Mask came about. And so again, it's just one of the initiatives that I created in the Goalie Guild. And it's been awesome because, I think a lot of times, so basically how it works is our foundation will cover the first $100 for professional health care. So if a goalie reaches out or parent reaches out or coach reaches out and says, goalie Joe is struggling and he needs some help or she needs some help, our foundation will cover the first $100 to, again, help break down that financial barrier and to just make it easier for that goalie to go in and talk to someone on a professional level. And it's really cool here locally. We have the University of Denver has a program called CPEX, which is Center for Performance Excellence, and it's right on campus. And these are amazing graduate students that are working with athletes every day, providing a lot of that assistance and helping athletes of all ages, create strategies to help them, perform better mentally. And so partnering with them to help local goalies and then just having that outreach on the website, it's like, it's okay to not be okay. And it's like very, very normal for goalies to deal with some of these mental issues and to deal with some of this anxiety and depression. And let's just have a conversation. And so we give out these stickers, these helmet stickers, because it's a great way for a coach to just like slide that sticker over to their goalie and be like, hey man, I hear you. Like I'm here if you need anything, if there's anything going on, like if there's anything we can do to help you feel better, or get back to normal or get over whatever they're dealing with. Like there is a program out there. There's someone here that understands the position. There's a group that can help you get the help that you need. I'm by no means a professional, mental health care worker, but I still want to help. Yeah. And I think that's how 99% of goalie coaches feel. Like they want to help, but they don't want to say the wrong thing. So they just say nothing. And that's
not helpful.
Yeah.
That's not helpful.
Yeah. You got to say something.
Knowing how to take that first step.
Yeah. And it hasn't been easy for me. I mean, like I said, I've never experienced like real depression or anything like that. And so even in my very happy life that I've had, like how can I still make a difference? How can I still help? And I do have this community. I do have this opportunity to get these stickers out to goalies all over the world. And so again, it's just like, what can I do to give back to the game that's given me so much? And I think the most important thing is, again, like giving the goalie coaches and maybe the parents as well, and even head coaches who have never experienced the position before, so they don't really understand what it's like to be a goalie. Like, hey, that head coach, if he's listening or she's listening, like that's totally fine. You can still help your goalies. Like, you can just let them know that you're listening and that if they are dealing with something, let's have a conversation and try and work through it. No one has all the answers.
Yeah.
And so, how do you have those conversations? How do you kind of erode some of those stigmas and just bring those walls down a little bit? And it can be really hard for coaches and for goalies. But this has helped. And so I think it's just, again, trying to normalize those conversations and normalize the fact that, like, yeah, we deal with anxiety. Like, I deal with it. Like, my palms get sweaty. Like, I was anxious coming in here because I haven't done a podcast in a while. But, like, dude, that's totally
You're
fine.
doing a phenomenal
thanks.
job.
Once I start rambling,
I say, no, you're good. No, you're good. No, you're doing a great
So
job.
good, so-
I think we should point that out.
Yeah, thank you.
should feel
Thank
good
you.
about yourself.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
You were one of the most anticipated guests on the show, and
Awesome.
you have lived up to that anticipation.
Cool.
I do think it is something that doesn't get talked about enough. We talked on this show a few weeks ago about how Nathan McKinnon was on Spit and Chicklets and was talking to the host of Spit and Chicklets about how he found a sports psychologist who's helping him out. Because if you see him, I mean, he's one of the headiest guys out there. You can see when he gets angry and he gets frustrated. And we were just talking with Tom Green before you came in here about how I noticed that during media timeouts, he'll skate around their zone and like around a face-off circle and flip his stick. And I think maybe that's something he's been taught by the sports psychologist to like try to get out of your head, because basically everybody on the ice is gunning for him now.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, like, one, it's okay to not be okay. Two, what can we do to develop some strategies to help whatever it is you're dealing with? And I've heard some amazing ones, and I'll tell you one that I heard from one of the most legendary goalie coaches of all time, Mitch Korn. And Mitch Korn told me a story once about a goalie that was really dealing with a lot of anxiety. And how this goalie figured out this strategy is beyond me. I don't remember that part of the story exactly, but basically what this goalie did is he took his wife's perfume from home and sprayed it on his blocker and on the inside of his blocker. And so anytime he would get really, really anxious or really like he was dealing with, those symptoms, he would like real quick take a sniff of that blocker, and the smell of his wife's perfume would calm him down.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's something.
And so like it's just about like realizing like it's okay. Like when I hear now like a professional hockey player, an amazing player is going to see a sports psychologist, I'm like, that's amazing. Like that guy is giving himself a chance to not only help himself, but he is normalizing this for everyone out there.
It's about damn time that we all started talking about this.
Yeah.
It's true, because
Yeah.
this is, I think everyone, Jordan Chavez here at the station has done a lot of great work about this and trying to get the word out, because he suffers with anxiety. And he talks about how when he goes to a therapist, he doesn't necessarily consider it, I'm going there because something's wrong. It's more of, I'm going there because my mind is just like the rest of my body, and I need to make sure that my mind gets a checkup just as much as my body does when I go to the doctor. And he said that, and it impacted me, and I'm going to go see someone, and I think everybody should. If we don't talk about this thing and make it more normal, we're going to continue to struggle, and it's not worth it.
Absolutely, and Corey Hirsch is a well-known former professional goalie who's an analyst now, who has really helped the goalie community by coming out with his issues and the suicide ideations that he had. And then there's another goalie that came out. Clint Malarchuk was before Corey Hirsch, and Clint Malarchuk has the book, and I'm not sure if you guys remember, he was the one that had his throat cut, I think in the 80s, and that was I
do remember that.
Yeah, for the, I think, Buffalo Sabres. And so Clint Malarchuk was kind of the first goalie to come out and share his story, and that was extremely impactful. And then it was Corey Hirsch. And then it was a goalie by the name of Ben Meisner, who is now playing in Germany. And then after that, the big one was Robin Lehner. And Robin Lehner, I had the amazing opportunity to meet him at an NHL goalie camp in Madison a few years ago. That dude was so intimidating. And this was when he was really struggling. Like, he was in the middle of his drinking issues and everything else. And he just looked angry. And I didn't want to get anywhere near him, because you knew he was dealing with something. But again, the same thing. Like, I'm not going to go up to a guy like I admire this man. I'm trying to stay out of the way. I'm there to do the video. Not to coach or you know what I mean? So that was the situation. And when he came out with his story and he shared that with the world, it really hit me, because it's like, you can't just let those things go. Even if it's, amazing guy, Robin Lehner, and I'm the video dude for this NHL camp. Like, what could I have done to been like, hey man, like, I love you, like, you're an amazing goalie, like, I wish you the best. Like, anything positive that you can put in his sphere of stuff that he's dealing with. And I feel like that with everyone now. Like, if I ever see anyone that's struggling at work or is having a bad day or whatever the case may be, it's like, I just want to go there and be like, what can I do? Like, what's going on, man? Like, how can I, start a conversation or just get them to know that someone's there and, like, appreciates them or at least is there to, like, talk.
We got to stop asking, how's it going, just as a mindless question and more of a, how's it going? No, I really mean it. I think it's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Justin Goldman, I cannot thank you enough for coming in here. This is fascinating. If folks want to get in touch with you and the Goalie Guild and the foundation, how do they do that?
Pretty much any major social media platform. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, it's all at the Goalie Guild. And also now with MindSpark Learning, which is really exciting because we're taking their education model and replicating it in the sports world. So a lot of the stuff we just talked about, I'll be doing now for MindSpark Learning, which is really exciting. And we're based in Lakewood. So any of those locations, you can find me, or you can find me at a handful of Avalanche games.
I'll find you at a beer league.
Yeah, find me at beer league. Yeah,
and I'll probably fall in your crease and dislocate my elbow again.
Yeah, just get out on the ice with us. I'm ready to take some shots. So
you're a good man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. We got to go to a metal show sometime.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll just do this. Is that the metal
throw the
thing?
Horns, throw the horns.
They're throwing the horns.
Yep.
I'm cool. All right, we'll be right back.
Coloradans are passionate about Colorado, and at 9 News, we love to hear all about it. Call, email, or find us on social media. 9 News listens.
What a fascinating interview that was.
Oh, yeah. Great stories.
He is just incredible. He's a great voice for the sport, great voice for the position. Glad we could have him on the show. And what a mind, that must be to be sitting in the arena and potentially be called in to do something.
You're sitting there in the second period watching the game, and the goalie's slow to get up. It's like, oh, God.
I know. When he talked about it, it was interesting to hear him say that the third period is when you're like, it's not a big deal.
It'll be over before I'm there.
Be in the dressing room, and it's not a big problem. But, man, can you imagine? And just remember, folks, if he ever has that moment, you heard him here, maybe not first because he's done all sorts of other stuff. I should play our little feedback music because, man, did we get some feedback this week. I posted something on Twitter the other day, and this is – so here's the interesting thing. The more that we talk about altitude and this situation, the more people are interested.
Oh, yeah.
I hate to do it because I feel so repetitive. I feel like we're doing it every single time.
Yeah, but it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. So anyway, let's get into some of the comments. I posted something in asking if people, because I think this is a bit of the leverage that altitude has.
Yeah.
Is you got angered fans. I was going to use the P word, but I'm not going to use that, even though I think that's perfectly clean and you can use it. You have angry fans who are going to cut the cord on their cable because, the whole situation is going on, and the only reason I have my cable is so I can watch the Avalanche, and that's our case at home. But I'll tell you what, I know what that termination fee is. And when I call Comcast and say I want to cancel this, I'm not going to pay $250 just to make a statement.
Yeah.
Even though that's like 2 months of cable, I'm not going to pay 2 months of cable just to make a statement.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Avs fans are starting to run into. So 70 replies to my question asking if people have cut the cable or not. A lot of people, a lot of yeses, a lot of no's. So I was surprised. There were quite a few people that said that they have done it.
Yeah.
Ken Ross said, I'd get hit with a cancellation fee. I'm not going to do it. Sam says, no, but the whole situation makes me furious. It would be great. A great night to stay in and watch the game. Jason says, haven't yet, but I am planning on canceling my regional sports subscription. Guess what? Most packages, that isn't included.
Yeah.
So,
it's not an easy decision to make, but yeah, for some people, that's the only reason they've got it.
Joe Coughlin says, you can't cut regional sports if you have TV. I tried. I'm going to try to get $250 a month, or $2.50 a month for altitude credit. Now, Joe, if you have Comcast, you're halfway there, my friend, because Comcast, for some reason, is refunding what I think it's $1.25.
Big
which
spender.
we were talking with Tom Green. What could you buy for $1.25? I don't know, an hour and 15 minutes of parking in Denver.
Seems like a good value.
You could buy a bag of chips from the. Actually, I think a bag of chips in the 9 News lunchroom costs more than.
I think it does.
I think it's $1.30 or something like that. But $1.25 you're getting back.
Put a down payment on the bag of chips.
Our good friend Chris Shalene, former photojournalist here at 9 News, says, I'm looking at switching to CenturyLink Prism. Someone wrote to me in this, and I don't know if it's true, and I apologize for not looking this up, that CenturyLink Prism doesn't exist anymore. And if you have CenturyLink, they tell you you can use CenturyLink for internet, but then you need to get DirecTV. So that would eliminate that problem. Like, the Prism TV still exists, but you can't get a new Prism subscription. You're just kind of grandfathered in.
Yeah.
So I don't know. By the way, do you want to just turn that camera off that's making the beeping noise?
I think a nice ambient sound.
Yeah. It's going to be shooting only me. No. But I hear that beeping noise in the background, and now it's gone. Oh,
Fun story.
so
It was
peaceful.
already only shooting you. That was not you're almost out of room. It was you're out of room.
Well, why does it keep beeping? Why does it just beep once and say you're out of room? I don't know. 9 News equipment. Anyway, a lot of people. Thank you so much for weighing in. I do want to say one thing, and I kind of mentioned this at the top with Tom Green. This is not a knock on anyone who works for Altitude. No. I've said this before. I could go back and pull the audio, but they're incredible people, and in this situation, they are in a terrible spot.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who are kind of being held accountable for this by the fans. They're not the ones that are in the room trying to make a deal.
Yeah. No, they're just trying to do their jobs, and they're doing an incredible job at it.
Yeah. Hockey road trip, something we
Yes.
touched on with Tom Green. So we did the trip earlier this year. So we're going to, by the way, we're going to bookend our year with 2 hockey trips.
It's a good way to spend a year.
So the Avs are in St. Louis on the 17th of December?
16th.
16th of December.
And then Chicago on the 18th.
That's right. And so we're going to do something like that. We're going to do a couple nights in St. Louis, take the train up to Chicago. Are you planning on, or have you ever done this before, taking a hockey road trip? We want to hear from you. Email cheapseats@9news.com, or you can tweet at us, 9cheapseats. The other question I have, because we're going to do this trip, and I think we're going to try to do the podcast on the road. Do you know a Blues fan or a St. Louisian who's an Avs fan, not a Blues fan, who's an Avs fan and watches the games in St. Louis? Or do you know a Chicago person who's an Avs fan and watches the games in Chicago? We would love to meet up with them on our little trip and make a little podcast out of it. I think that would be fun.
Yes.
We should do that.
There has to be one in each city.
One other observation. Tickets in Chicago cost about 3 times as much as they do here. Our seats, I think, in 326 row 12 go for probably at a normal game, maybe around $25-30.
25 to 30, yeah.
We don't pay that because we do the season ticket rate. These seats, $76 for the same, basically the same view at the United Center. And what's amazing is in St. Louis, it doesn't cost a ton, and they just won a Stanley Cup. How does that work?
I have no answer for you. That's insane.
We should do a breakdown. Maybe we'll do a blog post with a breakdown of the costs, because I think that's interesting.
Definitely.
It's not giving away too much what we're spending on things, right?
I don't think so.
It's not too much personal information.
You just hop online and look at what the tickets cost.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody could figure it out. You're smart people in our audience. So if you know someone in Chicago, you know someone in St. Louis who's an Avs fan, we want to meet up with them on the road trip. We'll bring the podcast kit. And in our moments of not watching hockey and drinking delicious beer at local establishments, we will sit down and do a podcast with them. I think that would be fun.
Yep.
All I'm trying to think. I should look at the Avs schedule before we get out of here to see what is up after this. But I know that we're taping this on a Friday night. I know the Avs have the Coyotes in the last game of their road trip, or of their homestand. Before they start a 6-game road trip.
It's a weird sort of back and forth to start a season on. The scheduling is odd there.
It really is, and I think the rust was tough on them in the first couple periods of that Bruins game. They just did not look sharp, and then they kind of
played 2 games, then have almost a week off. That's got to be hard.
They got it back going, and everybody else kept going. I don't know why the Avs schedule was so weird, and maybe it's because some of these other buildings had things going on in their arenas, and they couldn't do them in those. Something like that. Capitals on Monday. So that'll be the night before this podcast airs. You get that. So the next game you can expect is the Penguins in Pittsburgh on Wednesday, then the Panthers in Florida on Friday, and then another game in Florida on Saturday. So they have a back-to-back. They're playing the Tampa Bay Lightning. That will be a fun game to watch.
Yeah.
And if I remember, when they played each other early on in the season last year, the announcers kept saying, this could be the Stanley Cup final. And then the Lightning got eliminated. Then the Avs went on a terrible streak in the middle of the season last year, and then the Lightning got eliminated, got swept in the first round of the playoffs.
Who saw that
on earth did that happen? So they've got the Lightning, and then the Blues, and then they've got another week off in the middle of October. They play the Blues on that Monday night, this next Monday night, and then they don't play again until the Golden Knights on Friday. So a long time off, but I really hope you'll be able to watch the games.
Yeah. You would hope, by that point, we're talking 10 games into the season. That's a significant chunk of time to miss there. There's got to be, you would hope, some movement on this.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Not
that we know anything, but you would think.
There's got to be some sort of movement. Yeah. Help us plan our trip. You got any suggestions, places we should go in Chicago and St. Louis? Let us know. Cheapseats@9news.com. I'm Steve Staeger, at Steve Staeger. That's Staeger on Twitter. He's Fake Dante. That's fake_Dante on Twitter. I'm going to try to play us out with actual music because that disappeared on me. But let us know. What should we do? What are quintessential hockey things to do in both of those cities? I don't know if there are many quintessential things to do in St. Louis. Yeah, super cheap because no one wants to go to St. Louis in the middle of December.
And both of us, have spent a lot of time in Chicago over the years, so we know that. But I am a blank slate, at least on St. Louis. I am open to any suggestions.
Same here. I spent a lot of time there when I was in Springfield, Illinois, because it was like the closest town to me. But I would love to go and explore it again. It's been a long time. So let us know what to do if you're from there. Maybe we were more than happy to go check things out. Also, my plug at the end of this show every single time is if you have a fan that you think we should interview, someone who is passionate, someone who would be good radio that you would want to listen to, let us know. Send us an email, cheapseats@9news.com. Hit up the show at 9cheapseats on Twitter. He's Geoff Sawtell. I'm Steve Staeger. We are in the studios of 9 News. We will see you next week.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of Steve Staeger and Geoff Sawtell, who have absolutely no business covering sports at all. They're just fans. You can tell them how wrong they are by tweeting at the show at 9cheapseats or email cheapseats@9news.com.